Greetings and a very warm welcome to tonight's virtual lecture brought to you by the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art, Louisiana Chapter. I am Kevin Harris, president of the chapter. In tonight's presentation, Paris Without Skyscrapers, a forthcoming book promoting the traditional urbanism and architecture of Paris, which is currently endangered by the growing proliferation of skyscrapers. In addition to our lectures, the ICAA Louisiana Chapter hosts educational workshops and travel programs as part of our mission to advance the appreciation and manifest the principles of classical and traditional architecture and its allied arts by engaging practitioners, students, educators, and architecture enthusiasts of Louisiana. If you're not already a member, please consider joining and helping us continue to offer these wonderful programs. You can join by visiting our website, www.classicist-la.org, and clicking the Join tab. You won't want to miss signing up for our first in-person event since 2020. On October 3rd this year, we're again hosting our Foray series. Lectures and behind-the-scene tours of some of Louisiana's most enchanting properties. This next foray will begin in the riverfront town of Vacherie, Louisiana, at Oak Alley Plantation, and venture onto nearby properties for a rare glimpse into St. Joseph Plantation, which is also known as Félicité, as well as recently restored historical gardens. Announcements will be coming out soon. For tonight's program, I want to thank our ICAA Education Committee, and especially Michael Ruchel for alerting us to this publication on the eve of its release. Now to introduce our special guest behind tonight's event. Founder of the International Coalition for the Preservation of Paris, Mary Campbell Gallagher. Mary is a native of Chicago, attended St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, studied philosophy at Barnard College, received a Juris Doctorate from Harvard Law School, and a PhD in linguistic theory from the University of Illinois. She's a member of the bars in Massachusetts, the District of Columbia, and in New York State, she chairs a subcommittee on ABA accreditation of overseas law schools. And she's also someone who is actively passionate about preserving the beauty of Paris, a city which is so fundamental and influential to the early development of our state of Louisiana, and one held dear in the hearts of many of its citizens. Please join me in giving a warm, gracious Louisiana welcome to tonight's speaker, Mary Campbell Gallagher. Mary?
Thank you very much, Kevin, and thanks from me to Michael Ruchel, who was indeed a moving party here. I am absolutely delighted to be here, and that is not just because New Orleans and Paris both start out with a Roman grid system, although I am, of course, very sensitive to and appreciative of that. Let me just say one thing on behalf of ABA accreditation of overseas law schools. That is a moot point, and I am no longer chair of a subcommittee on that topic. Thank goodness. It was strenuous. So, to return to perhaps an even more strenuous subject of Paris as threatened by the most violent sorts of development, all in the name of being modern and good for you. That is where we are here tonight. That development is modern, development is good for you. No development is retrograde or ringard, as they say in French, and no development is old-fashioned, and it is probably a cause that is secretly supported by Marine Le Pen and the most conservative voters in the whole country of France. So it's an evil thing, and we want to avoid it if at all possible. Notre Dame is not only an 850-year-old wonderful monument, and the center of Paris and the center of France. The distance to Notre Dame is the distance to the Parvis, the plaza in front of Notre Dame, is the measurement of every place in France to Paris. This is also the site of a miracle, of a number of miracles, but certainly of this miracle, that the cathedral was in terrible condition after the Revolution of 1789. It was falling apart when Napoleon had himself crowned in Notre Dame. They put up rugs and curtains on the walls because the cathedral itself was in fact falling apart, and even so the cathedral was about to be demolished when in 1831 Victor Hugo published his book that is called in English The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and in French it's called Notre Dame de Paris. And that book performed a miracle. That book was so popular all over Europe. It was translated into other languages. It was spread everywhere. It was serialized. It was enormously popular that tourists thronged to Paris and thronged to the cathedral and embarrassed the city of Paris because of the terrible condition of the church, that they had to renovate the church in order to avoid being further embarrassed. That is what we would like to be able to accomplish with our book about No More Towers in Paris, because we should be able to embarrass, if not humiliate, the powers that be, the powers that be. The city of Paris, as everyone knows, is remarkably beautiful. As you can see, it has long, straight streets, and those were the work of Haussmann, which everyone knows about, and that took place between 1853 and 1870 under the auspices of the Emperor Napoleon III, completely remaking the city so that it had a number of different centers of churches, of civic monuments, and everything was in a sort of order in which the individual buildings, individual dwellings were subordinate to the overall pattern of the city of Paris. The Place de Vosges is one of the highlights, and of course at night Paris is even more beautiful. I am showing you a picture of Paris in flames, of the Notre Dame in flames on April 15th, 2009. Not because Notre Dame was defeated, it was not. It was saved. It was saved by 8 hours of work of the firefighters of Paris, who are in fact military people. The reason why I'm showing you the picture is that, to me, it represents the modernism of Paris. Not that the building is not 850 years old, as I've said it is, but because those firefighters who fought it so successfully used the most modern devices. Paris is modern down to the fibers. It's shockingly modern. It's almost too modern. They used drones. They used robots to fight the fire in Notre Dame. They also sent a little woman firefighter up to the top of one of these towers, and she happily saved her own life. But the modern devices that are in use in Paris are overwhelming. And when they talk about the saving the beauty of Paris as being Ringard, that is a severe mistake, because what Paris is able to do is to use the most modern devices and in the most beautiful ways. So this beautiful building is saved in its turn by modernism, which is in cooperation with beauty rather than in opposition to it. Now, there were those who disapproved, of course. Everyone knows about Le Corbusier, who arrived in Paris in the early 20th century, Swiss fellow, with big plans, including his fake name, Le Corbusier. And he had plans for Paris. You may recognize that here we have the island we were just visiting. And he recommended tearing down the right bank and building skyscrapers there connected by highways and pathways. This was his idea of what would be modern for Paris. It was not anyone else's idea, happily. That was not a successful suggestion. However, other modern ideas followed. In 1971, there was a demolition that stands for Paris the way the demolition of Penn Station does for New York City. It was a real turning point in people's thinking about saving older buildings, older structures, and it was a source of tremendous guilt for the people of the city. For some of them, but I'll come to others. Was the market of Paris. It was called the belly of Paris by Balzac. And every day the streets were clogged with the trucks going back and forth to Les Halles if they could move. It was difficult as the trucks got bigger and as the crowds got bigger. It got more and more difficult to bring in the produce and to sell it in Les Halles. And the decision to demolish these structures was made with difficulty, except, of course, by the planners who thought it was a modern thing and a very great thing to do. One of these structures survives in France, but otherwise they were marvelous steel and glass structures and served their purpose very well as a center of a market that was incredibly lively, where people of all classes would go at night, would get a bowl of onion soup, would mix with the people who worked in the market and with the animals, and it was an irreplaceable center of the city. The space is still there, but in the place of Les Halles is a shopping center. Not the same. Not the same. And the second shopping center, the successor shopping center, is in the place of Les Halles. But the arguments that were made for moving the market, that those may have been arguments that could not be overcome. But the argument for demolishing the buildings, those arguments may perhaps have been wrongly heeded. But the purpose here of demolishing the buildings was to be modern. And that was 1971 when the buildings were demolished. Not too long afterwards, the Tour Montparnasse opened in the center of Paris, a sore thumb in the middle of the city, according to everyone. It was opened in 1973. No one goes to Paris without noticing it. It cannot be avoided. And it is horribly ugly. However, the people who were in favor of demolishing the Les Halles were also, to some extent, in favor of building buildings like the Tour Montparnasse. And it's surprising, perhaps, but those people included General de Gaulle and his Minister of Culture, André Malraux. Their ambition was to put towers where Les Halles had been, in the third arrondissement, right in the middle of Paris. Happily, I think by accident, I mean, some things happen by miracle, and I'm all in favor of talking about miracles, but some things happen just by happy accident. By happy accident, de Gaulle had left the presidency, and Malraux was no longer Minister of Culture, and therefore it was not possible at the time when the buildings were torn down. It was not possible to insert into that place the towers that they would have liked. However, Malraux is definitely in charge of this project, approved this project, as well as a number of other tower projects in Paris at the same time. Any of you who know Paris know the Corbusier, which is also something that Malraux was very appreciative of. excuse me, little bit of error trouble here. Yeah. At that time in the 70s, the modernists were in charge of the planning department, and not only was the Tour Montparnasse built, but there were several apartment complexes built. You haven't heard about them. You went to Paris and nobody told you that there are towers in apartment complexes? Maybe that's because they're such abysmal failures. That could be the reason. No one talks about it. These things are ugly. They leak. They are they don't work, and nobody is proud of them. Tourists do not go to the Front de Seine. Tourists are not told about it. At a slightly later time, we have a new idea of what is modern and what is good for Paris. And we look to the famous, perhaps unjustifiably so, the famous Guggenheim Bilbao, which opened in 1997. According to Robert Adams' essay in our book about Paris, the myth of the Guggenheim Bilbao is exactly that. It was supposed to be, as the myth goes, this structure created fame and wealth for Bilbao, which had been a rather humdrum place. As Robert Adam describes the facts, however, in his essay in the book, in fact, the Bilbao was a very down at the heels city, but it was receiving enormous amounts of European Union money, quite apart from anything that might have come from the Guggenheim. He, according to his account, which I commend to you, the Bilbao myth is just exactly that. In addition, it is an old-fashioned story, one of many about the 80s and 90s, which really are dependent upon the wealth of energy, oil that was available at the time at relatively low prices, and the building of buildings that require enormous investment in energy. And of course, that's one of the things that we have other essays about. But the myth of Bilbao was everywhere. You can look it up. You'll find lots of newspaper articles, lots of magazines about this, how Bilbao became a rich place because of the Guggenheim, and how a Guggenheim like that will, the implication is that a Guggenheim like that will bring wealth and fame to your city as well. And so, of course, there were people to whom that seemed like a very attractive thing. And there were developers, here's the intermediate step, there were developers who wanted to sell the myth. Who did they sell it to? Well, apparently Paris, because in 2008, the Paris City Council approved a study of 6 skyscrapers for Paris at the gates, at the old gates. As you know, Paris had walls, series of walls that were torn down one after the other as it got bigger and bigger. The black dots that you see are four projected skyscrapers. The City Council voted for 6 skyscrapers study. The skyscrapers would be up to 180 meters tall, and I will refresh myself, that's 591 feet. And they would be at the gates at the periphery of the city. Why the location? Well, a couple of reasons, probably. One is that it's Paris. There is no extra land. There is no empty land. Second, that those spots were owned by the city or by the national government, or by the railroad, which is to say the same thing. And so that land could be made available. So that is where the skyscrapers were going to go. Additionally, of course, people who lived in the nice neighborhoods, the beau quartier, would be able to think that those skyscrapers might be good for the economy of Paris, but they would have no effect visually on their own beautiful apartment buildings and parks. Let me just drop a footnote here and say that I think that is the most foolish idea of all. That those skyscrapers have an approach to the city and an approach to building that immediately corrupted everything else. But let us return. So, inspired by Bilbao, the city of Paris decided in 2008 to build skyscrapers at the periphery on the old gates of the city. They would be of a gigantic size. You see the tiny little object, gray object, fourth object from the right. That tiny little gray object is a huge Paris apartment building, Haussmannian apartment building. It is 66 feet to, it is between 40 feet and 66 feet tall. That's between 12 and 20 meters tall. So it's a big building. It's a huge building. The Haussmannian apartment buildings, as you know, in Paris are very big buildings. But compare that building with the skyscrapers that are being built, or that were it was decided would be built in Paris, and they're midgets. So the Paris Courthouse, which is now open, has been open since 2018, and is just to the left as we are facing the diagram. The Paris Courthouse is gigantic in comparison. It is 160 meters or 525 feet tall. It can be seen all over, and I'll show you a picture that demonstrates that. There were three buildings that were talked about immediately. That Paris Courthouse was one. The so-called Duo was another. You see it there. And the Tour Triangle, which has not yet been begun, was the third one over on the right. So there were three, and that the Duo has two parts. So that's why there are two parts for the Duo. The Courthouse, the Duo, the Triangle were the ones that were immediately planned. And they are gigantic. I think it's important to keep that in mind, that there are lots of reasons why they don't belong in Paris, but the fact that they're gigantic is one of them. Consider the courthouse. The old Palais de Justice on the Ile de la Cité in the middle of Paris had a nice human scale court in the middle, a gold covered gate, and you walk in, there's a human scale court in the middle of the building. The new courthouse, and this is a photograph by Brian Conley, whom some of you may know, which he took from the Eiffel Tower. The new courthouse, let me say, it sticks up the way the Tour Montparnasse sticks up out of Paris. Is it modern? It would be hard to. Why would anyone want a modern thing that looked like that? If it's modern, why would you want it? If it is not modern, why would you want it? What is the argument for dispensing with the old courthouse and building the new one? Now, of course, the Paris city government made arguments. It said there wasn't any space, and it's worn out, and there's a flood, and we have to. None of the arguments are any good at all. None of those arguments, and there are essays in the book by lawyers in Paris who fought like beasts to keep this thing from becoming the courthouse of Paris. They brought three separate lawsuits. They formed an association. They got the bar association, the Barreau de Paris, to go in with them, opposing this change, and nonetheless, they lost. This thing is enormously, may I say, enormously expensive, and so you have cost problems as well as aesthetic problems. But here is the glamour shot. Of course, this is another place where the people who do the illustrations of architecture have so much to answer for. This, of course, gives you no idea of how the building sticks out of the city, but whereas Brian's picture very nicely demonstrates that fact. Then there's the duo, and that is two buildings that lean away from each other. It makes you a little queasy, I think. Not sure what the benefit is. And that also has a glamour illustration as well. And then there is the Tour Triangle, which has not yet been begun. The developers, the promoters, are running into financial problems. So they are trying to get other people to come in with them. But let me pause for a moment about money and tell you that none of these buildings is needed by anyone. That whether in 2008 or 15 years later, nobody needs these buildings. The arguments for the courthouse were false. The arguments for the duo are simply fantasy, and as are the arguments for the Tour Triangle, which would be in the middle of Paris. The new courthouse is out on the edge, not a good place for a courthouse, but it's out on the edge of the city. The duo is in the middle, and the duo is just about finished. The Tour Triangle has not, there's no shovel in the ground yet for the Tour Triangle, but it's also in the middle of the city. And it is going to be a disaster for the aesthetics of the city, because you can see, even though this is a glamour shot that some illustrator cooked up, you can still see that it sticks up like crazy and is not going to add anything to the aesthetics of Paris. There it is in a Photoshop by Bernard Gazet, who is a member of SOS Paris, a French association I have been associated with for a long time. And here's another illustration. This is not a courthouse. This is not, excuse me, a skyscraper illustration. This is the what else. There's a what else, you know? The idea was to build the skyscrapers. And then the people in the nice neighborhood said, well, that does not concern us. And so, creeping little by little, we have other things that do concern people in nice neighborhoods. For example, the Samaritan. The Samaritan department store on the Seine side is a national monument. Nobody's going to touch it. However, on the Rue de Rivoli side, everyone knows the part of the Rue de Rivoli with the arcades, but not every part has an arcade. On the Rue de Rivoli side, when the new owners of the Samaritan department store decided to modernize the Seine side and put condos in and raise the roof and make other adjustments, make other changes to the Samaritan department store, they did not hesitate to change the Rue de Rivoli side as well. And as usual, they had Pritzker Prize winners to work on it, right? And so the Pritzker Prize winners went to work, and that's what we get. Yes! It was called a glass shower curtain by the opponents at the time it was proposed. But it's certainly different from everything else in Paris. There is nothing else like it. It is a city block long by New York city blocks. It is 7 stories tall. You have no idea if or where the windows are. and it does not fit in the city of Paris. SOS Paris and another association, Sites and Monuments, went to court. This is an illustration. I don't think it's a legal illustration. I think it's a political illustration. These two associations went to court to challenge the demolition permit and the building permit for this building of the Samaritan on the Rue de Rivoli side. In the administrative court of Paris, they won hands down the first time because the standard was under the Plan Local d'Urbanisme, the PLU, which is the planning code. Under the planning code, new buildings have to fit the context of old buildings. It's the anti-Venice charter. So new buildings have to fit the old buildings. So the judge looked at it, looked at what the city and LVMH, which is the money behind it, looked at what the city and LVMH were proposing and said, this doesn't fit the code. Yeah? Out. You lose. Needless to say, LVMH and the city of Paris took an appeal. The appeal was within the administrative court system, and again, they lost. They lost. And they had to go back to square one again. Finally, the case went to what's called the Conseil d'État, which has the last word on administrative cases, not money cases, not other sorts of cases, but administrative law cases. So the Conseil d'État looked at the PLU and looked at this proposal. And what can I say? There were a lot of rumors. There were rumors about who took the Conseil d'État to lunch. It's beneath my dignity to think about that, of course. But there were rumors about how the argument was pursued. In any event, whatever may have happened, the Conseil d'État decided that, well, look, the PLU has a sentence in it that says that contemporary expressions are going to be welcome. So, hey, this is a contemporary expression. Wow, this fits the PLU. Right? You figure it out. So, it got to be built. And there it is. Now, I argued to begin with that the towers are not constrained, they're not kept out there on the edge of the city. They are affecting everything else and affecting the thinking of the mayor and affecting the thinking of the planners. Here is a traditional Paris bench designed under Haussmann and Napoleon III by David, remarkable Parisian architect in the 19th century. And this is a sort of a bench that says Paris. When we look at this, it says this is Paris. This is a new Paris bench. Is it not modern? Don't you get modern shivers just looking at it? Doesn't this look old-fashioned to you in comparison to that? Doesn't this look contemptible and out of date? Then you want to just get rid of it, the way the mayor does? I mean, and then here we've got our more modern one. That's modern. That's the new thing. And there's more. Wait, there's more. This is really modern. This is beyond modern. This is, yes, it's the old bench, but it's the modern pissoir. Right? Would any of the gentlemen in the group wish to use the modern pissoir while there were some of their friends sitting on the bench? Doesn't its modernism just galvanize you? Or maybe galvanize is the wrong word, but doesn't the modernism of the whole ensemble simply reach your heart? The modernism is very exciting. Well, something is exciting. So here is another thing. Here are new lodgings that have been designed near the new courthouse. So the new courthouse has not kept its corruption or its modernism, to itself, but similarly modern buildings are being built near it. I am not entranced by this, but perhaps some of you are. And here is the lamp. Ah, yes. On the left is the traditional Paris lampstand. On the right is an exciting modern lampstand. Doesn't it excite you? Wouldn't you prefer to walk along a street lighted by those wonderful canisters of light in the modern lampstand, rather than the light and shadow that would be cast by the older one? These things where I have Paris, by the way, this is all from Twitter. Twitter is a whole different story. I will come to Twitter in a minute. So here's another one. Here is another Twitter picture. This is a picture that shows the old lampstands of Paris being thrown away and trashed by the city government of Paris. It's very modern. They are so old-fashioned that they deserve to be thrown away. And we, as observers of this scene, are very modern in being pleased with that. Now, I say that the Mercado Parisien, the Saccage Paris, is a Twitter handle, a Twitter term that ignited in the middle of April, also in the middle of Paris. It ignited in the middle of April when thousands of Parisians started sending messages, tweets on Twitter that showed the destruction that is being brought on to Paris by the administration. There were pictures of garbage in the streets. There were active shots of rats fighting in the elegant streets of Paris. There were pictures like the one I just showed you, contrasting the new and the old, contrasting the old and the new. And here we have the Morris column on the left, and someplace you can also paste things up on the right. I don't know what you call it, not a Morris column, but whatever it is. And this is a picture that shows an event, which was an event in Paris in which people took a bench that had been thrown away, discarded, to be sent to landfill by the city, one of those beautiful Davy benches, and they bought it. It was going to be auctioned off. They bought it. It's a Banque Davy, and they brought it back as a gift to the city. These are people, I don't know everyone there, but I do recognize a number of the people from SOS Paris in this group. And on the top right, the guy who is facing us on the right with his mask on is a assistant mayor of Paris. This is a picture of the president, the current president of SOS Paris, Christine Nedelec, and she's also president of France Nature Environnement and a staunch supporter of all the trees in Paris. Paris, soon to be disfigured, is one of the posters that went up with the manifests, as they call them, the manifs, the demonstrations against the new buildings. What is the political situation I am not a political actor, obviously, in France. I am a citizen of the United States. I'm born in Chicago. I have no connection to any political party in France. Nobody wants me. Nobody's asked me to be in a political party, and I can't anyway. I'm not a citizen. So what I am saying is, apart from that, But the political situation is the following, that nobody has any authority with respect to city planning, any real authority except the city council. This is a mistake of public administration, but from what I understand, it's the way things are. That's how, in 2008, the city council could change the height limits and allow 6 towers to be built. That's how it happened. They had the authority. It was perfectly legal. They tried, oh, by the way, they did try in 2014 to reverse that as far as the Tour Triangle was concerned. They had a vote in 2014 that came down against the Tour Triangle. City Council voted against the Tour Triangle by a narrow majority, but a majority. And the vote was close, and immediately the mayor, who by now was Anne Hidalgo, who is president, who is now mayor, the mayor went to court and got the vote overturned on a technicality. People had shown their votes and they weren't supposed to, something of that sort. So the leader of the conservatives, NKM, was defeated, and the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, won that round. But that's the way the politics of it, I mean the political structure. That's not the politics, it's the political structure. The politics is undoubtedly being affected by this Saccage Paris Twitter program. The politics is being affected in a new and different way. There is not a planning commission. We can complain about the planning commission, but there isn't one. There is no planning commission. There is no place to complain. There is no place to change things except in the city council. And the city council is compensated, they're compensated in many different ways by committee chairmanships, by, there are many ways that a city council member decides how to vote. So the only way to change the law is in the city council. What is changing the atmosphere, the vibrations, is the Twitter program, and that is having a good effect. Although Anne Hidalgo is pushing back, and do you know what she's saying? You would think she might say, well, we need the money, or you would think she might say, well, these buildings are going to help us because they will give us more office space, which we, by the way, do not need. Or she might say, we can convert the buildings from office space to housing, which we do need. She says none of those things. What she says is, are you ready? Are you ready for this? What she says is, the people who oppose me are volunteers for Marine Le Pen. They are all ultra-conservatives. That's who is spreading these rumors about rats in the street. Marine Le Pen's fans. So maybe someone believes that. I don't know. I'm not one of those people. However, that may be. This is back to Notre Dame de Paris, which was the miracle of Victor Hugo's book, and which brought thousands of tourists out. What we want in the International Coalition for the Preservation of Paris is a new throng of tourists who will ridicule what is happening in Paris, ridicule the idea that this is modernism and that this is better than the traditional beauty of Paris, which has been so exquisitely preserved despite all sorts of scientific advance. We want those thousands of people to turn out the way Victor Hugo's readers turned out, to ridicule the city into taking a new course, the way Victor Hugo's readers also took a new course. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to send you, when it is available, an e-book of our book, With Our Respect. Kevin will give me the addresses. If there is a payment. It's not just like coming here for free. There is a payment, and that is if you will agree to write a review on Amazon when the Amazon page opens up, we will send you a free ebook. Lots of nice pictures. We have pictures by Leon Creer, among others, and pictures of everything we're talking about. And I hope that you will accept our invitation. In the meantime, this is a wonderful Photoshop drawing by Jan Wires, the late Jan Wires, who said, "This is the Paris they promise us," with all those awkward things sticking up out of them. I think it's not far off. It's a joke, but it's not completely a joke. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Kevin, again. Thank you all for being here. I will be delighted to answer questions.
All right, Mary Campbell, thank you so much. Did you get him to go away? Thank you so much for your presentation tonight. This is eye-opening, and it is actually breaking news in many cases. Breaking in two ways. One, it's new, and two, it's breaking Paris. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. The offer for the free ebook, if we for everybody that writes a review on Amazon, we've got your emails. We'll send you as soon as we find out the book is available. We'll send everyone a reminder email so you can capture your free ebook on with these 49 essays. Is it?
Yep, thank you. That'd be great.
And this is wonderful. So thank you for what you do. And let me see, do we have any questions from the chats?
Questions or comments? I see a number of names I recognize as they came through the portals, right?
Right. So can you see those okay? Or do you want me to read them? We have one from John Daglish.
Oh, John Daglish, he lives in Paris, of course.
As I understand, Paris was highly influenced by Mayor Bloomberg and his visiting delegations and their strategy for New York luxury skyscraper housing.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part of
That
it.
Paris was highly influenced by Mayor Bloomberg and his visiting delegations and their strategy for New York luxury skyscraper housing.
Yeah, I think that's probably right, Sean. What's remarkable about the skyscrapers so far is that they are not for housing. They are not for housing, among other reasons, because the fire laws in Paris are so strict that social housing cannot be built economically in a skyscraper. And of course, the mayor had to go for social housing first. So the first buildings are not for housing at all. They're for offices, which are totally unneeded, and for the courthouse, which is also unneeded. However, the next building is in the 12th arrondissement, and Skidmore, Owens and Merrill, or SOM, is going to be designing that, and it is definitely luxury housing. And there is no doubt that Amanda Burden, who was the Bloomberg director of development, has been to Paris many times, speaks French, and has been working with the people in Paris along those lines. John, I completely, it's sad, but I agree. Yes.
A question from Liz to everyone. I love this. Thanks so much for sharing. What can we do to support the movement?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I want a recording of that. Thank you. That's beautiful. What can you do to support the movement? Well, every nonprofit organization exists to raise money. So you can, of course, donate money, which we need for promoting the book. When the book comes out in September, we will be promoting it largely, the French version largely in Europe, the American version here. However, I think that what has in fact happened is that the pandemic has kept Paris under lock and key. And so people, tourists didn't go there and see how awful things are. And these awful pictures on Twitter have shown the world, or have the New York Post had an article about it, Australian newspapers had articles about it. The word is going to get out about what is in fact happening in Paris. And so the extent to which you can promote and promulgate and publicize is the word I wanted, publicize what is going on in Paris, and resistance to it will be exactly on target, whether that's talking to real estate people, to publicity people, to travel people, to, Rick Steves should be doing a program about rats in the street. Or travel people, I think once travel is possible again, that's also where we want to make our voices known. But you can write something about it, and if you want to write something to me, I would be very grateful. Any good word that we get will be wonderful. We've gotten wonderful blurbs for the book, and your good words will be enthusiastically received.
Okay, Kelly says absolutely yes to writing reviews, and asked, did any private citizens purchase benches for their houses?
Purchase what? Benches for their houses. I don't know, but we should find out. I hope not.
She concludes, I'm invigorated by your passion and talk.
Thank you.
And Susan Ross says, bravo, loved the lecture. Deborah says, thank you. Helen says, I'll write a review.
Oh, Helen, I love you, Helen. Helen is my dear friend. Thank you, Helen.
And then Kelly Calhoun says, there's a piece of the Eiffel Tower in New Orleans now off at St. Charles Avenue. It's called the Eiffel. She's running by it now. Have you heard of it? The story of how it got to New Orleans?
Oh, no, I have not. I do not know.
It was the restaurant that was formerly at the Eiffel Tower is now in New Orleans. So New Orleans is very much interested in preserving Paris, one way or the other.
How wonderful! I love it. I love New Orleans. So I'm so glad. I think about that grid. Kevin and I talked about the grid, the Roman grid that is reflected in the French Quarter in New Orleans, and there was a Roman grid in Paris. But those unruly French people, they just made the roads go this way and that way, and then it took Haussmann coming through and getting those straight roads again. But the blocks, the square grid blocks, really disappeared for a while. But I love it that it's in Paris, that in New Orleans. Excuse me.
The hero says, "Bravo, Mary, for all that you do to save Paris."
That's so nice.
Then Christopher says, "Thank you for your lecture. What are the opposition's argument for the replacement of the benches besides modernization? Is it better ergonomics, etc.?"
That is a wonderful question. You won't believe this, but a lot of benches have been replaced by used railroad ties. Long pieces of wood with maybe some steel in the middle. You don't want to sit on that. Other benches have been replaced by hunks of concrete, by squares of concrete. It is appalling. And I would love to know what the best argument is. Mary, you must be a Marine Le Pen conservative. That's the best argument I've heard.
They're politicizing it. So.
Right, always.
All right. Liz says, some on the call have blogs. What's the date the book launches? Perhaps we could coordinate a release.
Oh boy, a blog blast. I love this. I love it. Right, yes. Kevin, how can we do that?
Give me the date and we will publicize everybody that's on this call. We will send you an email with a call to action. How about?
Oh boy, that is great. As soon as we have a definite date, it will be in September. As soon as we have a date, that'd be great. By the way, speaking of dates, The Robert Adam article is really absolutely wonderful. I asked him to do it to be the lead essay in the book. He really came through. It's a wonderful piece, and it is going to be published separately in the American Conservative. They've been really supportive of us, even as we put them off month after month. So I would just love that. Thank you.
Right. And Ashlyn has asked, to what extent have projects such as the Pompadou and the Louvre pyramid contributed to the modernization of Paris?
No doubt about it. That's a great question. That uh, among the other things that make people think, the Guggenheim in Bilbao and so on, among the other things that make people think this is the way to be modern, is the disasters that have already been chosen. And there are a couple that are little publicized disasters. For example, the Mitterrand Library, as John Daglish will know, that was all these structures with windows on all sides where the books were literally cooked. The books were cooked, and they had to put louvers into the glass to protect the books in the library. That was a disaster. The auditorium is a disaster, but everybody likes, or most people like, the IMP pyramid in the Louvre, and so that goes for our modernization, which then I think the questioner is entirely right. Then stands as a model for other modernization. Right.
DeRue says everyone should donate to this cause. And then John Daglish says that the benches, there is a recycling program group developed by one of the architectural schools where they repurpose waste for benches. Not that beautiful.
Oh, is that how it's happening? John, I will write to you to get more details because I would love to know about that. Something like that must be happening, and thank you for saying what it is. Great.
All right. Well, I think that's all our questions.
Okay.
Mary, I can't thank you enough. I look forward to learning of your book launch.
Thank you.
We will send out a call to action to everyone on this call.
Yes.
We look forward to Vive la Révolution, right? So,
Vive la Révolution et bonne soirée à tous.
I do. Laissez le bon temps.
Oui, that's a very, very New Orleans.
All right. Well, take care. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
I will. There, look at here's Nero Tadani. What's he doing? Thank you, Ashlyn.